Next, from Springfield, Governor Rauner holds a press conference outside of the governor's mansion and calls for a freeze on property taxes and further discusses other elements of his reform agenda. This runs about 30 minutes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Today is another in the process of taking on the challenge of turning around the state of Illinois. As I think you know, the legislature is holding hearings today on a number of topics. The most important one is on property taxes and the important priority of freezing property taxes and getting local control of the costs of government so we can hold down property taxes in the future. My concern, based upon feedback I've heard from the hearings going on today in the Senate, is that there is not a real sincere focus on controlling costs in local government and truly freezing property taxes for the long term and giving local control for the long term. There's more just general vague discussion and more commentary, even debating the issue of whether controlling local property taxes is important or not. And let's be crystal clear. Getting a handle on property taxes in Illinois and empowering local voters to control property taxes is one of the most important things that we can possibly do. Our property taxes, it's not debatable that they are punishing our homeowners, punishing our small business owners, punishing Illinois' competitiveness, causing us to lose jobs, causing the family incomes in Illinois to be lower than they should be. It's our biggest tax problem. That's not debatable. And for the Senate to spend time today debating or wondering how important property taxes are or how big a problem they are, that's a waste of time. That's not a sincere focus on the issue of turning our state around and getting agenda passed to get the state going in the right direction. And the sad fact is, when you look at the leadership in the General Assembly, Speaker Madigan, President Cullerton, and many members of the General Assembly that they control, they make money and their side businesses through high property taxes. They have a fundamental conflict of interest with the taxpayers, with homeowners, small business owners in the state. We've got to recognize that conflict of interest, and we've got to talk candidly and fundamentally about the challenges that are in front of us. Right now, there's an ongoing battle for the future of Illinois. It's the insiders, it's the political class against the working families, homeowners, small business owners of the state. That's the battle that's occurring right now today. And we can't let up, we can't fail in this battle. The side of good government has to prevail over bad government. The side of homeowners and taxpayers has to prevail over the insiders and the politicians who make money from high property taxes. Small business owners have to prevail over the government bureaucrats that are driving up the costs and driving employers out of the state, hurting job opportunities for our hardworking families. That's what the issue is here. And when Speaker Madigan and President Cullerton say they're for the middle class, it's baloney. Property taxes are the #1 tax crushing the middle class in Illinois. They are protecting the political class. That's the battle that's going on here. It's the middle class versus the political class. Mike Madigan works for the political class. The lobbyists here in Springfield, many of them are former Madigan employees. Many of them still affiliate with Speaker Madigan. The lobbyists, the cronies, the patronage workers, the bureaucrats, the government insiders, they're doing well under Speaker Madigan. And Speaker Madigan is leading the pack. He makes millions of dollars from the status quo in Illinois. We've got to take the power back from the Speaker, give it to the local voters. And on property taxes, this is the critical issue for us. We need the power away from Springfield, so Springfield isn't mandating the costs of local government. Local voters, local taxpayers control the costs in their local governments. So here's the critical thing that we're proposing, and it's right in our bill. I hope, for those of you here today, I hope you've all read the bill. We want local voters to have a voice and control over when and how property taxes are increased. Local voters have a voice in that, to have local control. But even beyond that, we want local voters to control and decide what gets bargained, what gets bid, how is competitive bidding done, what are the costs inside their local government. The governments belong to the local voters and the taxpayers. They don't belong to the special interest groups that work for the government or that are inside government. The governments have got to be responsive and owned by local voters and local taxpayers. That's what our bill does. It empowers local voters. It takes the power away from Springfield insiders like Madigan and Cullerton and gives it to the local voters. Now, I'm joined here today by a number of folks. I'd like them to address you as well. Leader Radogno, Christine Radogno from the Senate is here. She will speak next. But we're also accompanied here today by farmers, homeowners, small business owners, and a site selector, someone whose business it is to help businesses decide where to locate and site their businesses. And they're going to comment with you now about the issue of property taxes and how big an issue this is for the state of Illinois. At this point, I'll turn it over to Leader Radogno.
Well, thank you. I am very honored to be able to participate today. I represent a very middle-class district. It's a district that is primarily bedroom communities. These folks are hardworking. They are not particularly wealthy, but they're making it. They're doing their part. They're paying their taxes. The number one call that I get into my district is, what can I do about my property taxes? Even knowing that we at the state level do not have as much as we wish we had to do with property taxes, that is the number one frustration. I remember getting a call from a retired gentleman who said, I saved, we paid off my house so that we could stay here and live here in retirement. I have to move because I can't afford the property taxes. They continue to go up. Unlike your mortgage payment, which you lock into for 30 years, you get that unexpected surprise when your property taxes go up. I remember that personally as a young homeowner, getting that first notice from the bank that my escrow was insufficient and thinking, holy cow, how am I going to handle this? And then you think about a family that has someone laid off, or is not able to get employment at the level they wish they could have, and how that challenge affects them too. So it is definitely a middle class problem. Now, we as legislators and the governor as well, we're not unattuned to the complexity of property taxes, to the fact that they do in fact fund our schools and important local services. But the bill that I proposed for the governor gave local governments the tools to control costs. So what we are not interested in is to just freeze it and walk it away. It's a let's freeze it, give voters some control over it, and give local governments the tools they need to be able to control those costs. If we don't do that, that senior gentleman that I talked about is leaving his home and no longer paying those property taxes. In fact, he's probably going to Florida. My daughter, who just bought a house a few years ago and looks at homes in other states that are 2 bedrooms and are 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, and the property taxes are a fraction. Believe me, young people in this state are looking at those comparisons and saying, why am I staying here? We have to get this under control, and I think the proposal before us is realistic, and it's cognizant both of the taxpayer end of things and the side that provides services to taxpayers as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Now, for a little different perspective, I'm going to introduce Brad Migdal, who is a corporate site selector. Brad?
Thank you, Leader Radogno. My job is
spell that, please?
Migdal, M-I-G-D-A-L.
Where are you from?
Chicago.
Do you have an organization you represent?
I work for a corporate real estate firm. My job is to help companies and advise them as to where the best cost of doing business. And I think what people don't realize is property tax is an above-the-line cost, not a below-the-line cost. It's a cost that it hits my clients on a day-to-day basis. I'm sorry? Oh, so my cost is a property tax an above-the-line cost. It's a cost that hits my clients on a day-to-day basis. They analyze that cost comparatively wherever location they're going to do business. I think one of the fears that we have in Illinois, that Illinois is not just an Illinois-based economy, it's a global economy, a multi-state economy. And so when users are looking at whether or not to be in Illinois or to be somewhere else, they're looking at what their above-the-line costs are. But more importantly, I think one of the biggest things that if you look at any site selection magazine or any magazine that talks about where companies are going and in a corporate survey or anything like that, they're looking for labor availability. Where is labor at and where can they afford to live? And if we put a building somewhere, is there labor there and the people can live there? So that's the challenge I think that my clients are facing, is that if they put a facility somewhere and they locate there, is there going to be the availability of labor that can afford to live 5 minutes from their facility? So, the governor and team have asked me to tell them what what businesses are looking at. Businesses are looking at above the line costs and how they can measure above the line costs. And property tax is one of the highest above the line costs. And we measure on a per square foot basis in the industrial world and in the office world. So the higher it is, that's what it's compared against. And it's just taken into account in a total corporate site selection, activity or analysis. I'm going to introduce Perry Kraft.
Spell your name, please.
Kraft, K-R-A-F-T. I'm a family farmer. I live in Springfield.
What's your first name?
Perry.
P-E-R-R-Y?
Yes. Yeah, the property tax issue hits us directly as farmers and landowners. As you know, agriculture production's a very cyclical business. We've been going through some pretty good times the last few years. Now we're coming into a very difficult phase. Income's going to be dramatically reduced, if not negative. The property tax increases that we've experienced are going to be a direct burden for us. When your business is running the red and you have property taxes increasing at that time, it can be very difficult. That's on a personal basis, but I tell you, on a statewide or a larger scale, if we've got property taxes that are discouraging ag infrastructure, large companies, chemical companies, grain companies, ethanol companies, from wanting to be in Illinois and producing here, that's just hurts us over and over. It hurts our markets. It hurts everyone involved. There's less labor, less people being hired, less businesses being started. It's so important, and that's really a larger point versus just a regular, property tax bill to an individual owner. Those are things that can't be measured and are just extremely important to us. I think it's time that Illinois, come around and be competitive with the neighboring states. So, Mike?
My name's Mike George, George. I'm in Springfield. I have rental real estate. I get a lot of people that come in. My business is designed for short-term, year to 4 years. A lot of people come in and they are looking to get used to the area, to see where they want to be before they buy. And the biggest comment I get, some people look at places to buy, they end up renting from me because of the property taxes. I've had recently several tenants who have actually left early and decided to leave the state. Just one yesterday. So I see it directly. I speak to realtors and I tell them what my situation is, what I hear from people, and they say they hear it all the time. Our taxes are way out of line compared to other states. I also wanted to say that, especially in the kind of business I'm in, I pass the tax along. So if the taxes go up, I charge more. And that continues to hurt people when they're paying higher taxes for their rental properties. Thanks.
All right. With that, I'd like to open it up so questions to the group here today. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is going to vote on maybe two measures that they say are identical to your property tax freeze. In most negotiations, one side puts a proposal on the table, and maybe it doesn't include everything that you want, but one side puts a proposal on the table. Why don't you say, okay, that's your first negotiation proposal, now let me make a counter offer and go from there?
The Senate so far is leaving out far and away the most critical elements of the bill that we introduced several weeks ago. And until and unless they're ready to talk in good faith about those issues and include them, there is no real reform.
Sometimes it takes years to get something through this legislature, as you well know, or your colleagues next to you have told you. Why not take the property freeze right now to claim victory and then go back and convince the people, build like you have been with the turnaround agenda, keep building on those other points to get your other pieces passed.
What you just described is a process that's gone on in Illinois for years, and it's the reason we're in such deep, deep trouble. Having no real reform and then declaring victory that's how we get in the mess we're in. I'm never going to be one who claims victory for something that's not a victory. We need true structural reform. We are in such deep trouble, we can't afford anything less. We can't afford to nibble around the edges, do very, very minor short-term things that don't change the long-term trajectory of the state, and then declare victory. That would be a failure for the people of Illinois. We won't let that happen. We have compromised. We have compromised in good faith extensively. There are dozens of things we need to do right now to get the state turned around. Dozens, because we are so badly managed, and the trajectory, the path we're on is so damaging to the working families of this state. We've taken those issues in the spirit of compromise. We've taken them off the table. We have come down to only 5 things. And when people say, well, 5 things is a lot, I say 5 is 1% of what they passed this spring. They passed 500 bills. 500 bills this spring. They could have passed 5 that matter. Term limits, redistricting, remap reform, property tax freeze with local control of government costs, workers' comp reform, real workers' comp reform, not phony like they've done before and like what was just voted on by Speaker Madigan last week, and real tort reform, given we're regarded as a judicial nightmare for employers in this state. 5 real reforms, take everything else off the table, and in exchange for those 5 real reforms, we'll negotiate in good faith about a truly balanced constitutional budget. Even then, they've refused to have real negotiations on the specific issues in those 5 bills. So far, we've not seen any good faith compromise on their side.
I'm told President Cullerton met with you today and proposed something on school funding and property taxes, a freeze of sorts. Your reaction to what he proposed to you?
Well, I'll say a couple things. I appreciate the president meeting directly today. It's always good to have direct face-to-face conversations, and I appreciated that opportunity with the speaker a number of days ago and with the mayor as well. And these face-to-face meetings will be happening on a regular basis. I hope. I'm certainly pushing hard for that. In terms of the specifics that the president outlined, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to go into too much detail. I should leave that to him. I don't want to break confidences. I'll say that I am supportive of relooking at our education funding formula, which is basically what he was proposing. I agree with him on that. I support that. Question, can we do that now to a substantial conclusion or not? I think would be hard to get that done given everything else on our plate. But whatever time frame he'd like to pursue it, I am very open. I think we need to relook at our education funding formula in Illinois. In terms of the president and his proposals about freezing property taxes, I'll just say that to the point the other gentleman made, the ideas on the table didn't include what really matters. I'll say that.
Is that prevailing wage?
He's offering 2 things that you say that you want. Doesn't that seem like a good deal?
You know what? In negotiations, folks love to pick out pieces that they would say is a compromise. And the reality is, both sides have to agree what the priorities are.
So
we've made it clear what our priorities are, and so far they have been unwilling to talk about any of them. We're not talking about term limits, we're not talking about remap, and on the property tax freeze particular, the core issues of local control of government costs. That's the single most important thing, local control of government costs. They haven't allowed that to be on the table yet. And without that, the reform will not stick. It's not sincere. It won't be real.
Governor, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes.
Because,
yes.
Governor, you've talked about Michael Madigan working for the political class, Cullerton working for the political class. What would you say, though, to people who say you've taken $1 million donations from corporate donors, and some people say, look at Rauner's budget. It doesn't seem to hurt corporations as much as it does, sort of lower, poorer people. What's your response to the $1 million donations you received in your own campaign that you have?
My donors are basically taxpayers. My donors are taxpayers. And the reality is, I have not taken money from folks who do business with the state, who make money from the government by the government spending more money. Those folks, frankly, it's illegal for businesses or individuals who contract or do business with the state to make donations to politicians. That's a good restriction. I haven't taken money from any of those folks. My donors are taxpayers, pure and simple. And that's a
taxpayers.
Terrific. You know what? We need success in Illinois. We need corporations in Illinois. If we push employers out, we don't have anything. We need to, just a second. This is one of the most important issues. We need taxpayers represented. What we've got here under Speaker Madigan and President Cullerton is a government working for the government insiders and the folks who make their money from the government. We don't have representation from the folks who just pay taxes, who just want to grow jobs, who just want to work and not take things from the government, who just produce. Those folks aren't represented. The political class has the power. The working class, small business owners, big business owners, all job creators are getting punished in Illinois and they're leaving. And as long as that's true, we will never have balanced budgets. We'll never have the revenue to fund our schools or to fund our social services. That's what we've got to take on. It's economic growth and working people and business owners versus the political insiders. That's the battle that's going on right now.
Well, Governor, you suggested a good question to me, and so I'm going to ask it, and then if you'd be so kind to follow up. Talk about your priorities. I don't need to tell you what month we're in. It is June. It's past the 31st. So what is your plan to get to the end of June for Illinois? The budget and all the other things that are important.
Our plan is to negotiate with the legislature in good faith to get bipartisan agreement on a structural reform to grow our economy and get real value for taxpayers and properly fund our services of the government long term. In a constitutionally balanced budget that's sustainable over the long term. That's what we're going to get done. Our goal is to get it done as quickly as possible. Our goal was to get it done May 31st. We pushed hard. That failed. We're going to keep pushing as long as it takes.
There were about 100 AFSCME
Yes,
members.
sir. Yes, sir.
Governor, you talked about how the $1 million contributors to your campaign are taxpayers. They're taxpayers. What about the people who are taxpayers who may contribute to somebody else? Are you saying that the ones that contribute, even though they're the job providers, are they more important than the ones who are the workers?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not following your question.
Well, you said that the ones who contribute to you, they're the taxpayers. They're the taxpayers. Well, there's other taxpayers in the state. Are you saying the ones who are contributing to you and are the job providers are more important than the ones who are doing the work?
The distinction is people who make money from the government versus people who produce and give to the government. That's the distinction. That's the critical distinction. Right now, Illinois is controlled by Mike Madigan, John Cullerton, the politicians in the General Assembly that they control with their money, and the money comes from the folks who make their money from the government, from the taxpayers. That's the distinction, the critical distinction. Right now, the taxpayers themselves who don't make money from the government, who just pay taxes, and who own homes, who own small businesses, just want their kids to go to a good school and have their school decently funded. They're the ones who are being abused in Illinois, and they're the ones who are leaving the state. Who's doing well is the political insiders. Mike Madigan is making millions from his law firm from high property taxes. John Cullerton making huge wealth from his law firm from government inside deals. The lobbyists, many of the lobbyists I've learned the hard way here in Springfield, they've worked for Mike Madigan. They're affiliates with Mike Madigan. They're making a lot of money, many six figures of money. And the government insiders, the folks inside government who control government through Madigan, they're making a lot of money, way more money than the folks on the outside of government who are just taxpayers, who just want the government services to be efficient and effective. That's the battle, that's the distinction. And right now, the insiders, the political class is winning, and hard-working families, taxpayers, small business owners, and homeowners, they're losing, and they're leaving, and that's what we've got to change, and that's why we've got to win this fight. Okay.
There are 100 people from AFSCME marching today. I'd like your reaction to that. And if it's the last question, there's also a memo out there that says that the State Museum closing will be short-term gain, but long-term folly in a sense, because you'll lose grants and contracts and collections that'll have to go back and forth, and you might lose accreditation at the State Museum and all of the brain drains. So those are the two questions in the last question.
LT, is that legal? He did two questions and they were really long. So I do it. So, okay, but he's a good guy. All right, so what was the first one? AFSCME demonstrating. You know what? The insiders in government who are making a lot of money from government are going to be cranky about the changes.
That's your employee?
That's going to be the case. Change is difficult. We've got to make change. And to folks in the government, I say, first of all, thank you for being public servants. Thank you for working for the people of Illinois. We want government to be a good place to work with good pay and good benefits. That said, we can't have government employees make much more than folks who are just taxpayers, to your point, who don't make money from the government, much more money for working in the government than they do out in the real world. Right now, today, insiders make more than the folks in the real world. We have pensions that are unaffordable that don't really occur in the real world. We have health care benefits that are unaffordable that don't really occur in the real world. And we have a pay scale based purely on seniority, not on productivity, not on effectiveness, not on saving taxpayer money. We need to change that. And the folks in charge inside government don't like the change, but it's what's best. Frankly, the hardworking, good people who are government employees, and there are many of them, they're going to be happy with the changes. But some of their leaders and some of the folks who are there for other reasons, they're not going to be happy with the changes. That's okay. In terms of...
It was the State Museum, and there's a 6-page memo.
See, you said he could do two.
There was a 6-page memo from the staff to DNR, to your people, saying if you shut down the museum or even take the steps you want to take, you lose, collections. You might get sued over people who have given you stuff. You lose federal grants. A brain drain if all these people are laid off and you've got all these years of experience. And the tourism, like 200,000 people visiting the State Museum in Springfield every year. So is that not? Is it worth it to save whatever, like $5 million, given those things, and that you'll be breaking a lot of contracts?
Well, Burns, you're getting into a level of detail that I don't think it's right to go into right at this particular conference. We can talk with you further with our staff about it. The reality is, nobody likes cuts. I don't like to make cuts, but these are cuts that have been brought about by Speaker Madigan, President Cullerton, and the politicians in the legislature that they control through their money and their influence, making bad decisions for decades. That's what's causing this financial crisis. We have to live within our means. We are going to get a constitutionally balanced budget that works for the long term, and we're going to get local control of the important issues. That's what we're going to drive, and in the long term, we'll be able to properly fund the necessary services.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.